Welcome, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Lynn Berger, host of Lynn Berger Interviews Remarkable People, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Brian Hamill. Photojournalist Brian Hamill is known for his still photographs from movie sets and portraits of rock and roll legends, athletes, celebrities, and politicians. Everyone from Muhammad Ali to Frank Sinatra to Barbara Streisand has been the subject of his lens over the course of his 5 decades of work. This lifelong New Yorker has captured some of the most iconic photos of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, which were recently compiled into his 2022 book, Dream Lovers, John and Yoko in NYC. His work on set spans more than 75 motion pictures, including unforgettable films like Annie Hall, Raging Bull, Big, Tootsie, and You've Got Mail. Wow. Thank you for being here today, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So take us back to your childhood and what that was like.
Well, I grew up in a working class neighborhood, which then became a kind of a yuppie neighborhood called Park Slope in Brooklyn.
We all know that.
We didn't have any money in the family, but we weren't poor. We were impoverished, but we weren't poor. So, we had the library a couple of blocks away from us. My mom made sure we all got our library cards, and we read books. So, even though we didn't get to travel, we could read about places where we ended up traveling to. So, we had a very enriched family, a very close family.
How many siblings?
There were 6 boys and 1 girl in my family. We lived in a 2-bedroom, tiny 2-bedroom tenement apartment on 7th Avenue in Brooklyn.
Did you know what you wanted to do when you were that age?
Well, I had an older brother, Pete, who at the time that I started thinking about my future, he was an artist.
Mm-hmm.
He hadn't yet become a writer,
Mm-hmm.
but I would try to draw, and like he did, he was very gifted,
Mm-hmm.
a very gifted artist, and he was a big influence. He was like almost like a father figure to the rest of us. So he bought me my first camera, which was a Miranda, but I had asked him, "Hey, are there any colleges that where I could take photography?" And he said, "Well, there are 2 that I know of," and he was one who knew about them. One was the Art Center School in Los Angeles, and the other one was RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology, which I ended up going to. I went to RIT. I did 2 years, and it was financially tough to make the tuition. So I just said, you know what, I'll take off for a year, and then I'll go back after I save up some dough for the tuition myself. I'll work. And in that year, I got drafted into the Army, as did all my friends. All my friends got drafted in 1966. And some went to Vietnam, and I was fortunate that I didn't go, even though when I was in the Army, I volunteered for Vietnam because I wanted to go and take photographs. But for some reason, they turned me down. My kid brother had been there, and I was thinking it might have been because he was there, because when I got interviewed by a colonel about why I wanted to go there, he asked me, did I have any relatives there? And I said, yeah, my younger brother, John, he was with the 173rd Airborne, and he was in Vietnam. But I never found out the reason. And then I did 2 years, and when I got out, of course, when I got out, I ended up getting my bachelor's, but I didn't go back to RIT. I went to City College and
Right.
got my bachelor's there. But, and then,
And how did your career start once?
well, actually, I was doing, even when I was in RIT, I had photographed when Jose Torres, who was challenging Willie Pastrano for the light heavyweight crown, and I was friends with Jose because when I was a kid, I did some boxing, and my teacher was Cus D'Amato, who was Jose's manager. So, and then Pete became friends, and my little brother Pete became friends with Jose. In fact, they even shared an apartment together. They were very close friends. May they rest in peace. They're both gone now. But so anyway, he was challenging Willie Pastrano for the title, and I went and I photographed from my seat. I didn't have credentials to get up front on the ring apron, but anyway, to make a long story shorter, when Pete actually wrote the article for the Saturday Evening Post, because then he was already a writer, became a writer, and they used like 6 or 7 of my pictures in the spread.
Oh,
so
what a...
while I was still in RIT, so it was like a big deal. Hey,
sure.
Even the teachers were saying, "How did you get your pictures?" And,
they wanted their pictures there.
So it was like a big deal to get published pictures, because back in those days, the Saturday Evening Post was like a big deal, So that I actually had my first professional stuff in 1965.
Okay.
While I was still at RIT, and then when I finished school and I segued into the movie business, but there was a guy that, again, my brother Pete befriended when he was living in Rome, and he was writing pieces for the Saturday Evening Post from Rome about movie stars, Marcello Mastroianni, Claudia Cardinelli, Sophia Loren. But the PR guy who handled him was a guy from Brooklyn, Harvey Matofsky. But he was living in Rome, Harvey, and they became friends. And at one point, when I was working, when I got out of the Army, I was working for a fashion photographer as an assistant, and Harvey called Pete when he was coming to New York with an Italian starlet and said, "Do you know any photographers? I want to get some pictures of us." So I took the pictures because I got to use the studio because it was after hours, the studio hours were like till 6 o'clock, and then so I said, well, I can do the pictures. He got me in the movie business, and cut to, he was producing his first movie, which took me to Rome, and I hadn't been there. I hadn't been to Europe. It took me to Rome, Tunisia, and Sicily on the same movie. It was called La Martlet's Tale, written by a guy, based on a book by Nicolas Del Banco. But the movie never got released.
Oh.
But it was just, it was about a Greek family, and it was directed by John Crowther, who was the son of the then New York Times movie critic Bosley Crowther. And for whatever reason, he, since the money for the movie was raised independently, it didn't get picked up by a studio. It never got released.
Then what happens after that?
Oh, so anyway, I ended up getting my second movie was a movie that my brother Pete wrote called Doc, which we shot in Spain. So I went right from Rome, from working on one movie, to Spain, and I worked on that movie because I got an assignment from New York Magazine to shoot some pictures on it, and I ended up, the director, Frank Perry, actually got me on the payroll. So I shot there for like a month in Spain on the movie. I wasn't the only photographer. There was a guy from Spain who was the unit still photographer. But while I was there shooting, the son of the DP, director of photography, his name was Alec Hirschfeld. He told me, hey, when you get back to the city, you should get in the union. I said, okay, I didn't even know there was a union. So anyway, he and his dad, Jerry Hirschfeld, signed my application. I ended up getting in the union, but I had to be tenacious about it because they weren't trying to, they were trying to keep people out of the union, you know, but I was, you know.
You didn't stop.
I didn't stop. In fact, the store, I went up to get an application, and she said, oh, they're not being printed. And I, you know, being from Brooklyn, I was like, yeah. I said, well, there's one Scotch taped up right here. Why don't you just Xerox it and give it to me?
Oh, that's
Did you
great.
give it, give it to me so I don't have to wait. And she said, well, hold on a second. She went back and conferred with people back in the office, and that I guess I'd be regarded as being pushy. But I guess I was pushy.
Okay, that's got you where you are today. Yeah.
One thing led to the other, and I got in the union.
Okay, and then what happened once you got there?
Then I did a lot of movies.
But what was it like being a still photographer on set?
Well, the first movie in Rome was kind of weird because, you know, being a street guy, because I still regard myself, even with all my credits and everything and my worldly experience, I'm a street guy at heart. But the first movie I worked on, you know, all these Italian, and I was the only photographer on that movie, on that movie, The Martlet's Tale. They were all standing around like this, you know, like, and I was going, what the hell are these grown men looking so scared for? But that's kind of how it is in movie sets. You know, everybody, as we say in the neighborhood, you got to dummy up. You can't be talking and be yourself. You got to, you know, you got to be quiet and not draw attention to yourself. So I had to learn that aspect.
But you learned it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I did.
Because you were on quite sets.
As we say, you got to get with the program. You know, so I got with the program, and I went from one movie to the other.
So, do you want to talk about any in particular? I know you did a lot of Woody Allen films.
I do. Woody's like still a good friend, terrific guy. Yeah, he's a loyal guy. He's a Brooklyn guy, you know, and he made sure I was his photographer on 26 movies. And I had to turn down work from other talented directors because I was loyal to him about dates, you know. But okay, I already committed to Woody. Like I did 2 movies with Scorsese, and he wanted me to do another one with him, but I had already committed to a Woody movie, so I couldn't do it. So you fall out of sequence, you know.
Okay.
It's kind of like a sequence when you hook up with a director who likes your work and so forth. So.
Okay.
I did 26 of them with Woody, but I worked with a lot of top directors.
Yes. And I want to talk a little bit about some of your meetings with individuals, in particular John Lennon and Yoko Ono. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, John Lennon. The first was an assignment I got from Parade magazine. I had worked for an agency called Photo Reporters that was run and owned by two guys. One was Ernest Bohm, may he rest in peace, and the other one was Santi Vasali, who was a very gifted photographer and still alive, thank God. And he was living in New York at the time, but he was Italian, from Italy. Very gifted photographer. So he was very influential in my career, because they owned this photo agency, and that's how I got the Parade magazine, which is a Sunday supplement. And I had got the assignment to photograph John and Yoko. I said, okay, what do I do now? So I called Pete. By the way, are you still in touch with John Lennon? He goes, yeah. As a matter of fact, because that was at the time when the government was messing with him, and they didn't want to give him a citizen, they didn't want to make him a citizen, and Pete was writing columns for the New York Post defending him.
Right.
It's John Lennon, and they were friendly. So he just called up John and said, hey, my kid brother, he's got an assignment, and he says, yeah, tell him to come over tomorrow. So tomorrow, I had to get my act together. I'm going to see John Lennon and Yoko Ono the next day. So all the way over on the subway, but I got to precede it by, I had photographed there concert at the Garden, the one-to-one concert, which was a charity concert, but it was John Lennon on stage, you know. And you know, Stevie Wonder was part of the preceded John. So I photographed Stevie Wonder, and anyway, it was a good show all around. A very good show, and I got some good stuff because then I could be right up close because I had press credentials. There were a lot of photographers covering that concert because it was John Lennon on stage at the Garden. So when I went to his pad in the Village, I took like about 30 8x10s from them doing the concert. I hadn't met him. That was on August 30th, 1971, I believe it was. And then I was photographing him with Yoko on October 13th, a couple of days after his birthday, actually. His birthday was October 9th, and that was in 72. So I brought a bunch of things, and they said, I don't want to pull him out right away. I look like a brown nose, you know, I don't want to do that. But so I was waiting for the right moment, and I was nervous because I thought, okay, having worked on movies for 2 years at that time, there'll be a makeup and hair team, there'll be a publicist, you know, the whole wrecking crew, as we call them, you know. So when I rang the bell, and I hear a voice say, yeah, come on up. And I said, it sounded like a British accent. It sounded like it was John who answered the bell, you know. I go up the stairs. It was a rented place that they had. They hadn't yet moved into the Dakota, which was years later. But I went upstairs, and John opened the door and put out his hand and says, hi, I'm John. I went, yeah. Hi, John, I'm Brian. He goes, how you doing? I said, good, good. Would you like a cuppa? And being Irish, I knew a cup of tea. He meant a cup of tea. But I declined because I was so nervous, expecting there would be the whole entourage inside the apartment. But the only other person in the apartment was Yoko. And they were both they were both really exceedingly nice to me. I got to tell you that the whole time. Inside, up the spiral staircase on the adjoining roof, did pictures out there. They didn't rush me at all. They didn't say, hey, you know, we'll give you an hour. And there was none of that. It was like, you want to do any other pictures, Brian? Yeah. I said, how can we walk around the neighborhood? And they said, yeah, we'll walk around the neighborhood. So I walked around the neighborhood with them. And they were, but more important than importantly than they were nice to me, they were nice to each other. They had respect to each other, and they listened to each other, and I made a mental note of that. That's nice. A couple, they were more like sidekicks than they were husband and wife, you know. So I went around the neighborhood with them, and they were both very courteous to anybody who stopped them on the street around the West Village, and they were good listeners. They listened to every question that was asked, and there wasn't a horde of like groupie type fan people. It was Village was a little more sophisticated than other parts of the city. So.
All right, and then your career took you to places. You not only did movie sets, but you also got involved with political events and things that happened in the world, correct?
Yeah. Well, in 1972, an assignment from the New York Times magazine to cover the troubles in Belfast and Derry. So those are probably the pictures that I'm very proud of that nobody would really look at, but they're on my website. When I was there covering it for the New York Times magazine, Pete got an assignment from the New York magazine, so we talked on the phone, and he said, hey, I'm going to be over there, and like, why don't you just stay there and keep shooting? And then so I ended up getting pictures published, not just in the New York Times magazine, but New York magazine as well. The guy who put me under his wing in Derry, in Northern Ireland, Martin McGuinness,
Yes, yes.
important guy in
Yeah.
my life.
Yes.
May he rest in peace,
Yes.
because he's dead now too. But he was the head of the provost in the IRA
Yeah.
in Jerry. He ran him, and he was only like 21, 22. I think we were the same age. And later he became very important in politics, because he became an MP, you know,
Okay.
member of Parliament, and looked out for Ireland and for the freedom of, you know. But my parents were from Belfast, so I had it in me to be that way.
So it seems like you have been all over and got your name around, and who would have ever thought, right? When you look back at your career.
Yeah. Well, especially the way, you know, when you grow up, you don't have lofty kind of things, but everybody in my family was kind of ambitious, you know. My kid brother Joey, may he rest in peace, he won an Emmy from a thing he did on the mob in Atlantic City. He was a producer on a documentary. So, and then my brother Dennis, and he's still alive, of course. He just finished 4 seasons writing on Law and Order, SVU.
What did you talk about that you all got to where you are? What was your conversation?
Well, we talked about life, about politics.
I do have a couple of questions I would like to ask you. So when do you know you have the perfect shot? Like you seem to capture the moment with all your photographs.
Well, I try to, you know, there were certain photographers that, there was a photographer whose work that I still strongly love, and he was one of my idols, Henri Cartier-Bresson, and his whole thing was the spontaneous moment. So sometimes you have to wait and be patient for that spontaneous moment. Even when you're covering a journalistic thing, which you kind of keep shoot, but sometimes you have to anticipate. You have to have a good sense of anticipation. Like in boxing, in the same way, when you got to anticipate. That's why Ali was such a great fighter. He could anticipate punches before they were even thrown. So you have to have a good sense of anticipation. And also, sometimes it helps if you pre-visualize what you think will end up being a printed photograph. And it helps to have that whole pre-visualization thing going. And that's what I always do. Okay, well, so I know when I have something covered. I know when I have the right.
You know.
Yeah,
you
I kind of know. Yeah.
You just know.
Right.
And if you were to, if a young photographer was to ask you, that's how you would respond. You just kind of know. You have to be patient. And
yeah, you have to be patient. You have to be out there first of all.
Right.
You can't sit at home in front of a screen all day. If you're going to take good photographs, you got to be where the subjects are.
All over, right?
You know, you have to be all over. And the other thing that I see a lot of these with the digital photographers, I shoot digital, but what they do, they make a mistake. They take a picture and then they start looking at what they just did.
Right.
That's not what you should do. You should look home later. When you get home later, look at everything you shot and then edit. Don't keep looking at the camera. What are you going to do, show off or something? Hey, look what I got. No, you wait, because what you're doing there, if you waste that moment, there's other stuff going on that you should be covering while you're looking at the back of your camera.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, so a lot, and watch digital people. They do that a lot. It's a bad habit.
Well, when you were working, and you stayed in the moment.
Yes.
And then you went home and dealt with the work
then
that had
you
to do,
edit later.
that you had to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very, very interesting. Like the world has shifted in that way.
Yeah, it
right?
has. Yeah.
Right. Is there?
I'm not trying to shoot down digital photography because it's spontaneous, and you can do stuff with, once you get home and edit.
Right.
You can send stuff out right away that's current.
Right.
But don't look when you're photographing an event. Don't miss John Lennon at the Garden when you see him when he's got like a soulful look at the guitar. Hey, That's one of the things that when I shot that thing, my favorite one of him, he's like into a soulful down looking at his guitar. I'm glad I got that image.
Right.
But if I was busy looking at my my camera, I wouldn't have gotten it.
So that's one of the best lessons you can share with people
Yeah.
today.
Oh yeah. Well, also you have to get out there and you have to work hard. You have to try to shoot every day. That's what I would tell kids. Just and then also read a lot, because then it gives you ideas about what to shoot. I mean, there's a whole thing with composition and texture, but what you choose to shoot, the subject matter, is just as important as the lighting and the composition and the texture and all of that. Those are all elements that make a good photograph. But what you choose to photograph is important.
Well, that's very, very helpful. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? And of course, I'd like you to share your contact information and anything so people can find out more about it.
They can look at my work on my website, brianhamill.com. And you can see the books that I've done. They're mentioned there. And I did one on Woody and one on John and Yoko.
Thank you so much. I mean, you've done so much.
Can I tell you my motto?
Yes, please.
My motto is no cigarettes, no alcohol, no drugs, no MAGA Republicans.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much for everything you shared with us today. And there's a lot more, but we only had a half hour. So I want to thank you. And
thank you.
I recommend everyone goes to his website and looks at the incredible work
brianhamill.com
that he did. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.